we go.
Hello, everybody. This is Between Two Teachers, our Friday, February 18th episode here, and ongoing, giving you information about education issues nationally, state, and local. So we have a lot of stuff going on. We'll get to it real quick. All right. My name is Consuelo Lara.
And I'm Madeline Cronenberg, and I will start as always with our land acknowledgement. We pause to acknowledge that we have gathered on the ancestral territory of Hui Chin, which is part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karkan-speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their homeland. We offer our respect to their elders and all Ohlone people, past and present. And there is much that has gone on this week in education, as there is every week. I think one of the biggest things in news around the virus, which is all we've talked about for such a long time, or takes up so much of our time. The big conversation this week is around masking. And that's a conversation nationally where there are school districts and states where masks are now coming off because the variant is receding, thank goodness, and our numbers are going down. So more and more places are leaving it up to school districts and school boards to make the decisions about masking. And there are whole states that are rethinking indoor masking and whether or not that's necessary. It's a divisive issue, if there ever was one, and people are still very across the country unclear as to what they want to do. And there are lawsuits all over. And the new superintendent in Los Angeles, who started this week, his first big decision is going to be around masks. But he's got to decide whether or not the students need to still wear the masks outdoors, and then whether or not they're going to need them indoors. But the outdoor masking is going to be the first, I think, the first thing he's going to have to do. And he has begun. His reign has started. The other thing that's happened locally is the use of a parliamentarian in a school board meeting. And when you're going to use a parliamentarian in a school board meeting, it's the reason you're doing that is because there have been questions around how bylaws have been interpreted and enforced. And that's the only reason. The parliamentarian reads bylaws and tells people how to enforce them. And so there are districts that have them. There are districts that have a person who's already on the cabinet serve as the parliamentarian. We had, when I was on the board, we had the chief business officer. She was also the parliamentarian, and she would just interpret something and we would listen to her. Whatever she said, we would agree with. Or you can hire a parliamentarian from an organization, association of parliamentarians. And West Contracosta did that. They have a parliamentarian now. And one of the, I think, surprises to a lot of people, obviously not to the parliamentarian, but to everybody else, was that the way the agenda reads is that there are action items and discussion items. And the way the parliamentarian read the agenda, the discussion item, the action items need to be acted on by 10 o'clock or right after 10 o'clock. And then the meeting ends by 10:30. But if there are no more action items and you finish them by 10 o'clock, then your meeting must end at 10 o'clock. Whether or not you've had board comments or whether or not you still have other items that are really important discussion items, but they're not there as action items. And that's what happened the other night. The meeting ended to, I think, the surprise of a great number of people, because this interpretation of the bylaw had never been used in West Contracosta, to my knowledge, before. So whether they'll continue to, they can change the bylaw, they can do whatever they want. The board has it's the board's set of rules. If they want to make it later, they can do that. Or else they're just going to have to be more careful, know that they need to, limit their time speaking or set limits in other ways so that they have better management of the agenda and don't have to keep putting things over.
Well, there seems to be different ways of using a parliamentarian, apparently. When at the county board, we don't have that, but our council, she's always at our meetings, and sometimes something will come up and the president of the board will say, well, let's ask our counsel, our attorney.
Right.
And she pretty much knows what we should or should not be doing, or most time the question is this a violation of the Brown Act?
So see, that's a legal question, but the Brown Act is the law.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
the parliamentarian is just looking at interpretation of bylaws.
But sometimes she gets asked about
I'm sure.
public comment or other things that are really like that. So that's another, way to go about it. But what this reminds me of in the other time we had a parliamentarian member was in the Democratic Party meetings. And I do remember at the end her saying, well, does your agenda say you adjourn at this certain time? Then you better adjourn at that certain time. I do remember that. But it was more as needed, although she would interrupt if we were really in clear violation of something, but it was more, like a consultant, not somebody that's driving the whole thing. So I'm just very surprised, and I'm sure they were very surprised.
There was members of the public were surprised, and I believe that members of the board were also surprised.
Yeah.
So anyway, it just means that it's an issue. It's an interesting administrative issue that needs to be addressed, and it's certainly something they can address if however they want to. But it was unfortunate because they had just gone through a really important discussion around support for African-American students, and they were about to go into a discussion of the budget, right? And they had done a discussion on LCAP anyway, and that didn't get to happen because the clock ran out on them.
Oh,
So
right.
It's important to know, this is what happens with meetings. It's important to know, the lay of the land in these meetings. And you can,
Right.
so that but they're still struggling also with the mandate. And the great news is that California now has given access to the school district personnel to know what the vaccination status is of students. And they hadn't had that opportunity before. Now they will. So at the next board meeting for West Contra Costa and for anyone in California, you can now know what the percentage of your students are that are vaccinated. And it doesn't just, you're not just operating off of a county number that really doesn't inform your own universe of students.
Yep.
And that's a big plus, because now we're going to have information on that. And I think it'll make it much easier for people to make decisions.
Yes.
And also to decide what they're going to do about the virtual school, right? Which
that's another big one.
That's the super big one. How, they're going to have to grow it, and how, what the steps are in case there's any doubt they're going to have to grow it. They're going to know much. It's going to be very clear how many students are making the decision to stay out.
Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to just mention is that yet again, we still have the Arts and Minds initiative that's going to go on the ballot in November 2022. And it's to have a dedicated funding stream from our budget for arts education, for music and dance and theater and all things arts. And we've never had that in California. That's why they're always at risk.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
So this is going to take an initiative. People are going to be going around offering you an opportunity to sign your name on this initiative, and then we're going to get to vote on it in November. And the other initiatives that are up are the ones for the charter schools, and a number of others. There's a lot of initiatives that are going to be on the California ballot this year. And the big, big, big news that we really have to talk about is well, two things. This is not super big, but this happened. The San Francisco School Board was recalled.
That's something.
The recall was successful. Very few people voted in that recall, but they were very energized and upset with the board members. And there was a tremendous amount of very wealthy of money that came from very few people that supported this recall.
Oh my goodness.
But they're gone now, and the Mayor London Breed, who also supported the recall, will appoint the three new people until there's an election, which I guess is in November.
Jeez.
So that's gotten a lot of national attention, right? Where people are looking at what happened. And I think it happened for a lot of different reasons. One of the biggest reasons was that these three very wealthy people put a huge amount of money behind it and did a lot of, it was very much their effort to recall these people.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's that.
There's that.
That happened.
Okay.
But the other thing that happened is what we've talked about here for a couple of weeks now. Today is the 17th or maybe the 18th day of the Oakland hunger strike. And it looks like it will be the last day, because today, Friday at, I think it's 5 o'clock, there at 5 or 6 o'clock today, there's going to be a special meeting where two of the board members who voted for the school closures have proposed putting it over another year.
Mm.
And that's enough to not close these schools this year.
Yep. Wow.
So that is a big salute to Mike Hutchinson, Director Mike Hutchinson, and the enormous amount of energy he put in to keeping these schools from being closed. And that I know he's going to continue to put in, because now there are seats on the board. There are 3 more seats on the board up for election in November. And I'm sure that this issue of closures will be the centerpiece of any election in Oakland.
Absolutely. Well, oh my gosh, it's just such a great thing. I just can't believe it. It's really good news. Good news.
It's incredible news, right? I mean, it really is. And that the board members who are changing their mind, there's no crime in changing your mind.
Yeah.
They were wrong. They knew it. They knew that, they made the statement that they didn't have enough time to do the impact study. So the impact study came to them when these thousands of people came to their house and said, here's the impact. You want to see the impact?
Yeah.
Let us, since you don't have time to do an impact study, which you promised you would do, we will show you.
Yeah.
Right? And there were several resolutions that the City Council of Oakland did a big resolution to support them. There are bills in the state. The state has a surplus right now, to the extent that they are talking about repaying a debt. This is a time when you could do it.
Yep. All right.
So that's the big news. And my shout out this week goes to Director Mike Hutchinson, and of course, again, to the hunger strikers who laid it on the line and kept it at the top of the page in the headlines, and really made it a national story along with other hunger strikers. And people think there's nothing you can do, but there is.
There is. There's absolutely things you can do. Well, good for them, and a good model for many of us how to get things done, and line up these new leaders that need to come forward and run for these offices. So
right. And the students, I also want to do a big shout out to the students, student directors on that board. We talked about them before. They stayed with it all the way through. They've led rallies in Oakland. They have something called the All City Council, which is made up of students from all over. And they were led by their student directors in organizing and making sure that the board members who changed their mind, they didn't want to change their mind. They had to be brought to understand how important this was to everybody. And that took work and time by a lot of people to do it, but they did an extraordinary amount of work, and I am really happy that something, disastrous didn't have to happen to the hunger strikers, and the board members saw the light.
Great,
So
great,
that's
okay,
it.
okay,
That's how we end it.
yeah,
So till next week,
okay,
bye-bye.
bye-bye, everybody.